Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna. And with me this episode, our executive art director, Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
The special projects editor, Matt Kinney.
Hello, everyone.
Web producer, Ben Strano.
Hello.
And Jeff Rose is manning the camera and trying to keep Ben in his seat. Feeling a little foggy today. We're kind of fresh off of Fine Woodworking Live a couple weeks ago, and then we shipped an issue right after. So, but it was a pretty successful show, I would say.
It was a lot of fun, man.
It was a lot of fun.
We came, we saw, we had fun, then we left, and we're going to do it all again in 2018.
Cool.
All right.
Which is pretty cool. But figure we talk a little bit about the live event and maybe what we liked. You know, kind of favorite moments. Mine, I think my favorite moment of all was we talked to a lot of readers, but there was one gentleman, his name was Tim, and he's a cabinet maker in New York. And he grabbed me on Sunday and you know, wanted to bend my ear a bit. And one of the things that fascinated me about it was probably the most fascinating conversation over the weekend in terms of our subscribers was back when he was 18 or 17 or 18 in high school, he was struggling with school in his grades. And turns out he was dyslexic, but back in those days, they didn't really diagnose it. But he wound up, his goal was to be a builder or a cabinet maker. And he picked up an issue of Fine Woodworking magazine, and it actually helped him how to read, of all things. By looking at the drawings and the photos, he was able to get through the text, and then he was able to kind of figure out words, and he actually wound up, he kind of credits Fine Woodworking partially for his ability to graduate high school.
Nice.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. My favorite, I had a couple of favorite things.
Okay.
First of all, there was a guy there, a young guy, who works at Google named Thor Carpenter.
Thor Carpenter.
Yeah.
He was very nice. I enjoyed talking to Thor. I think he listens to the podcast.
Yeah, he does.
So hello, Thor.
Hey, Thor.
Hey, Thor, what's up in Seattle?
Two, against my better judgment and my knowledge from previous experiences, I got into a car with Raleigh Johnson. And this was not just any car, but it was a Tesla coupe or something, some kind of sports sedan. And Raleigh proceeded to drive it like the madman that he is.
In ludicrous mode.
In ludicrous mode. And then something called launch-off mode or something. And Raleigh, the first time he did it, he said, he looked over and he looked at the Tesla guy and he said, I think the front wheels got off the ground. And he was like, yeah. So, yeah, never a good thing.
That's not easy to do with the heavy car.
Well, there was
like
actually
that.
4 people in the car. Riley drives like a maniac.
Fortunately, the roads up near the Southbridge Hotel were really wide open and straight away.
This was in like a parking lot behind like an abandoned factory. I'm pretty sure Riley was going to, shoot me and dump me.
It's funny. It reminds me of a story, Mike. You might remember when Mark Schofield, one of our former editors, had gone out to see Raleigh, probably for the first time. Raleigh took him for a drive in this hot rod that he was building, and Mark came back and he's like, "I'm never working with that guy again." How about you, Mike? Any special moments, memorable things?
I think it's just the overall show. My recollection of the first 2 Fine Woodworking Lives we did was, especially the first one, is sort of like, okay, we're going to be there and all of our readers are going to be there. And like the readers were sort of this foreign entity that you weren't quite sure who it was or what they were going to be like. And this time around, it's like I knew a lot of people there. I was amazed at how many people I knew either, from teaching or from past Fine Woodworking Lives or anybody that's listened to the podcast. You kind of already know them. It feels like it. So it really felt like it wasn't sort of kind of us and them, the staff and the readers. It felt like, big party. Felt like you knew everybody. And even if you hadn't met them, you still kind of knew them. And
right.
It was very, very cool. I was pleasantly surprised and had a really good time.
Yeah, it was really, really great about the location was that everyone was able to hang out. Even, all the presenters, they were able to go to classes. They were able to have lunch with people, willingly or not willingly. But no, I'm just kidding. No, they all seemed to have a great time in their response to me, the presenters of the show. But I don't think there was a negative vibe in the place at all. And
No.
So
It was fun from beginning to end. It really was. I did not have fun.
well, I didn't have fun until I realized that the moving truck actually had gotten there with our equipment.
Right. I had
Then
fun
I was like,
after
okay,
the moving truck
I
was
can
unloaded.
I can relax
That's when
a
I
little
started
bit.
having fun. But from the hardwood derby was a lot of fun Friday
was.
night, even though both winners, Mike Pekovich and Diame Plotke,
Thanks
cheated.
very much.
They cheated, but that's okay.
Well, you cheated too and lost.
Yeah, but I didn't win. It's okay. I didn't try to hide the fact that I was cheating. That was fun. Hank Gilpin's speech
yeah.
after the banquet Saturday night was fantastic.
Yeah.
And to the Rikon guys, giving away basically every machine that they brought with them.
That was great.
Yeah, that was an amazing turnaround because, and I don't know what sparked it, but maybe
The
it was just
desire
the,
not to take it back.
Well, no, I think part of it, but I just feel like the whole, from the beginning when Renee had announced the scholarship winners, to us raising so much money for the Cub Scouts who had loaned us the track for the Hardwood Derby.
Right.
I think there was just kind of a giving vibe, and the Rikon guys turned around and said, "Hey, we want to give everything away at like 4 o'clock, 3 hours before the banquet." And so it was great, and they were actually very cool. It was almost like a stand-up routine up at the front of the banquet.
Right.
So,
Also, I presented, and Mike has too, presented all 3 Fine Woodworking Live shows. And what was different this time as the previous times was presenters were in the audience of listening to other presenters. So the first time we did it, I think we taught the whole time.
oh yeah,
Yes.
everyone worked. The whole time.
And so you couldn't go see other people. The second time we did it, I do recall that you had at least 1 or 2 free periods as a presenter where you could go around.
Right.
But this time, it was, you had, Chris Gochner came to mind, and then you and Chris Gochner went to see Andrew Hunter.
Right.
And so the people were going around and watching other presenters, which was nice.
Yes.
Yeah, the interaction I think was great. The food was great overall. I mean, I couldn't have expected a better result out of all the planning that went into it. So I was happy.
So our first planning meeting is next week.
Yeah, tomorrow.
I'm already working on next year's logo.
That's true.
2018.
Yes.
Right, so they changed the 7s and 8s.
I don't know. That's an option. I was going to go take it a different direction, but
Oh, yeah?
Well, probably one of the most fascinating things, before I move on, but we had Tesla there giving test drives to people, and someone actually bought a Tesla vehicle.
Yeah.
So Tesla said, "Yeah, thumbs up. We'll come back next year."
Yeah.
So that was pretty wild.
We need to charge more. If they can afford Teslas on the drop of a hat, we got to charge them more.
So Fine Woodworking Live was great, but before we move on, I just wanted to let people know that we're taking a survey, a satisfaction survey for the podcast. And if you go on to our website, fill out the survey, Ben will happily send you a bunch of Shop Talk Live stickers and Fine Woodworking stickers. They were like a hot item at Fine Woodworking Live.
Probably not a bunch, maybe one of each.
One of each, Ben?
yeah, one of you.
One of each.
You said a
He'll send you
bunch.
4 gross of each. It's
We'll send you a stack.
a stack of each.
All right. Anyway, we'll move on. So let's get to question number 1. And this one is from Jonathan. And Jonathan says, "I'm currently scheduled to take a class with David Fisher this summer. I have done some spoon carving, but never attempted a bowl. As teachers, do you prefer to have blank slates or a student who has already attempted the subject of the class?" I don't teach, so I'm going to leave this up to you guys.
I think it was Dave Sawyer who makes Windsor chairs. And a while back, I heard a story that someone wanted to ask him if he would teach them how to make a Windsor chair. And he said, "Sure, go make a Windsor chair and then come on up and we can make one, because only in doing that will you actually really understand what goes into the process, and I can teach you a lot more about that." So kind of to that end, don't be afraid to give stuff a try. This situation is a little bit different. Dave Fisher, he was on our back cover and does these tremendously beautiful carved bowls from logs. Really, really nice. But the thing there is that you're using a lot of weird tools and techniques. So if this means you're going to go buy a bunch of things before you get there, I wouldn't do it. Anything that where you're learning a technique which is sort of odd or strange, or tools you're not familiar with, I probably wouldn't worry about it. I would just show up and let him sort of take you through the process there.
Yeah. I'm kind of torn on this because I have taught both very experienced woodworkers and also people who didn't understand which way to hold a chisel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like complete novices. And both of them have their benefits. If you have some experience with the techniques and so forth of the class, that's fantastic as long as it's not bad experience. Like, so if you have a bunch of bad habits, that can be really difficult to overcome for the instructor because, especially if they're unsafe. And I've had students show up with, it's like, oh, how do you use a table saw?
Yes.
And it's like, how to use one. How many fingers do you have? It's like, at the same time, so in some ways, someone who has no experience is fantastic because you can show them at each step how to do things, and they have no biases.
Yes.
But those people can also be very frustrating because you can't tell them to do something like, hey, go and sharpen your hand plane. And they can't do it because they don't know. They haven't done that yet. So I don't know which one I would prefer. I guess someone who has experience and it's all been good experience, good habits, good understanding.
Yeah, I think for me, especially when I do like week-long furniture classes, and a really common question from prospective students is, how much experience? I don't know if I've been woodworking long enough. What do I need to know? And the answer is always the same. It's like if you have a sharp set of chisels, that says a lot. It means you know how to sharpen. It means you know what a sharp tool does. If you're comfortable with a back saw, if you can, take a block plane and make a quick chamfer, if that's not a challenge. It's just really, really basic skill set with the simple hand tools at the workbench. And really it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's an amazing amount. And if you just sort of just focus on those basics, I tell people if you know that, you can take any class that I teach.
Yeah, it's what I often realize when I start to teach a class is how much the work that I do and the way that I work presupposes a familiarity and knowledge and comfortableness with hand tools and sharpening. And so when I start to think, okay, well, now we've done all this. Now go prep the inside face of all your boards. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. They don't have sharp hand planes.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you realize that now I start to rethink how to teach. And she's like, okay, well, the first day, what we're going to do is go through sharpening.
Yeah.
And spend a day teaching people how to sharpen. And so that's, if someone asked me what class should I take first, I'd say, well, find someone who knows how to sharpen and learn how to sharpen your tools.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of I'm not an instructor. The only thing I teach really is baseball and softball. But from what I've seen and what I experienced as I've learned woodworking, I found it better. Like I took a whole class. Instead, it wasn't a project-oriented class. It was, hand tools, fundamentals with Phil Lowe. So I learned the fundamentals of sharpening. I learned, how to use chisels safely without jabbing them into your thumb. So I think in terms of like if I'm a student, I'm thinking, okay, I need to learn the technique before I can go and see Mike or Matt about building something with them because, I should know that there's going to be some steps in there that are kind of fundamental and I should be beyond that. But anyway. All good.
I mean, learning woodworking there's no shortcut to it.
No, for me, I've also, in terms of my learning curve, as I'm struggling with something, I think, and I'm probably not different from other woodworkers, is that if you're having trouble with something, then you realize, I should take a class on this and really kind of hone this skill if I'm going to continue to use it in whatever I'm making. So.
But it sounds like a fun class. I would love to do that.
Yeah, it does sound like a fun class. Just wailing away and making big chips and stuff.
Yeah.
It does scare me, though, when you see him swing that adze, and like his femoral arteries like just inches away. No? Ben's shaking his head. He was there when he saw a video. He shot a video of Dave.
It's totally safe. The
Totally
way
safe.
he does it.
Yeah.
And you'll see in the video why.
Okay.
according to Ben, it's totally safe.
You can't get hurt with
It
this.
is impossible to get hurt.
So says Ben. Better lawyer up, buddy.
What's your email address, Ben?
All right, let's get to some more questions. Matthew, someone else, writes, "What is your preferred angle for sharpening paring chisels? Also, I was wondering if you have dedicated chisels with different angles for paring softwoods and hardwoods." I don't have paring chisels at all.
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 paring chisels, and they are. I keep them at about 27 degrees.
Okay.
But I've also found that just my normal bench chisels, if they're sharp, they do an amazing job, and those are like 32 or 35 degrees.
Yeah. My standard chisels are 35, and I kind of use them for everything. I do have one really long Witherby chisel, which is about 1 inch wide. It's probably 25 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my guess, and that's sort of, it's definitely never something that I pound with. I tend to use it just for paring. you know. So I'd say 25 is good, but I do think, I think every single chisel I have other than that is 35 degrees, and I'm doing a whole lot of pairing with lots of my chisels.
Definitely, I pair with my bench chisels, and the thing is with pairing, you should be removing a very small bit of material at a time, and so anything that's sharp will do it.
Yeah,
it should. The only advantage to a paring chisel is it gives you a longer reach if you're, working inside somewhere. But I've never had a problem with my.
Where the 3 paring chisels that I have, how they differ, and where I think the advantage of them is to a bench chisel is that they are long, and they actually allow you to have a great deal of finesse and control over what you're doing. The longer it is, there's more finesse in the control of it, and that's why I have them, is for that length.
Do they not have? They're Japanese. They do not have hoops on the.
Correct. There's no hoops. They're solely for push.
Cool.
Yeah. And the handles, the blades are not very long, and then there's a neck, and then the handle is quite long. I've actually discovered recently that I believe Japanese push chisels are set up in a ratio of 2 to 3 to 2 or something. So if the one I remember was 2. It was the handle was the blade was 600 millimeters, and then the neck of it was, maybe 300 millimeters, and then the handle was 900. So they have these I think I'm getting the ratio wrong for each of those, but it's like a 3 to 2 to 1 ratio for setting up the length of the 3 parts of the chisel, and the handle is by far the longest. And it really does give you a great deal of control.
Is the neck on those cranked enough so that the blade will stay flat, like the shaft of the chisel won't interfere with keeping the blade flat on the surface?
That's right. It comes up at a slight angle. It's not like a true crank neck, but it just comes up at an angle.
Yes.
Yeah, and it allows me, one place I use the chisel a lot, the normal paring chisel, is if I route grooves or dado specifically in case sides or something, a lot of times that will leave whiskers on either side of the dado. And when my chisel is sharp, I can just set it down flat on the case and then just push it along. And usually it's, it'll reach across at least half, if not all the way across the case side, and just shave away those whiskers. And it can do that because the handle is cranked up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So
cool.
Actually, a guy I worked with, I think he had a Marple's chisel with sort of a cranked neck. I said, "Where'd you get that?" I just did it.
Right. Did he heat it up or did he just bend it?
I'm not sure.
Just bent it.
Just did it. Right enough with this pickup. This is good.
So far, so good.
We're, breathing easy. I'm dancing inside.
Lots of dead air.
Lots of dead air. Now it's time for our all-time favorite furniture of all time for this week.
All right.
Who's going to... How about you, Mike?
Alrighty. this is a piece that's actually inspiring. It has inspired a piece that I currently am working on right now. It's a piece by George Nakashima. It looks like a little credenza. I think I don't know what it's described at on the website, but a lot of people, when they hear George Nakashima, they think of like his live edge work on tables and stuff with the sort of big, heavy, kind of rectilinear bases. But I love his case work. There's a really strong mid-century modern contemporary feel to it that I think is kind of overlooked with a focus on some of his other work. So this is a case piece in walnut dovetail corners. What I like about it is there are 4 doors, sliding door panels, and each door is decorated with a single giant sort of kumiko design. So much, much larger in scale than you would normally find traditionally. And what I liked about it is he took this traditional element and sort of blew it up and used it in a really different way to give it a tremendous amount of graphic punch to it. And I think like right now, so this was probably, I don't know what, late 50s, maybe early 60s. I don't know when this piece was made. But even now it has just a really contemporary feel. And it's very cool. I'm definitely stealing some of those ideas in my current piece.
That's a great piece.
How tall is that? Do you know, Mike?
I don't.
Can you scroll down a bit?
15
It was
feet?
actually like described as a nightstand, so I don't know how big it is. Like you look at it without context, I think it could be like a really big credenza.
Yeah.
I have
Well,
a
it
feeling
says
be a little smaller
5
than
foot
that.
long,
Oh.
wall hung, 6 foot long with 2 doors, 7 feet long with 3 doors. And so that one has 4 doors. It must be,
I don't know. So you
8
do think
feet
it's really
long?
big?
yeah, it's big.
Huh.
That's
Yeah,
a cool
I love
piece, though.
that base construction.
Yeah.
What I like about it, did you mention mid-century modern at all?
Yeah.
Okay,
Twice.
because what I like about this piece is because it does have that a feel of mid-century modern where it's got this case piece on a base, right?
Yes.
What I like about this is that the base feels adequate for the case piece. Like a lot of mid-century modern almost seems like
Spindly. Yeah.
no, well, spindly base, but like an elephant on a tiny little ball. You know,
It's a tough aesthetic to get right. I'm playing with that right now, and I do something. It's like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think I really like that. In terms of like mid-century modern, it's a style that I think has been trending for a while. It's been trending in terms of collecting for a long time.
Right.
And it's just now, I think, working its way to woodworkers themselves. And you think it's this foreign style that, ooh, who works in that? Well, every great studio furniture maker that we sort of put on a pedestal and have been influenced by, George Nakashima, Sam Maloof, James Krenov, they're working right out of the mid-century modern style. And I think those elements are still really fresh and clean. And it's definitely kind of where my stuff is going.
Even Tay Fred.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tay Fred was designing sort of in the height of that style.
yeah, that's a fantastic piece. I'd not seen that piece before. That's really beautiful. I like the like heavy linen fabric behind the kumiko panels.
Right.
It's really nice. And it looks like it's walnut and probably maple or basswood or.
I believe the Japanese craftsman actually made the kumiko for the piece, so they probably used like a traditional. What do they use, like a type of cedar or something? I should know.
So that was made in this kumiko was made in Japan.
The panels were made in Japan.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Sweet. I like it.
Yeah.
Looks like, something I can actually build too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's the deceptive part of that.
That's the deceptive part of what we do
I'm not
here.
saying that in regard to you, but
No, I mean, I know what you mean. Sometimes we make things look really easy.
That's what I liked about Krenov in college. It's like, I can make that. 30 years later, I'm almost there.
right, yeah, because that piece is so clean and simple. You're just like, it's just some basic joints down there. It's a
little bit of a half lap, and then if you don't know that side is angled.
Yeah, that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Then you got to deal with all the kumiko.
I mean, I think what I've learned in the time that I've been making furniture is that I probably shouldn't say this, but the less complicated something looks, it could be the more difficult it is to make. But I know that's not true because you have all that super fancy period stuff, which is insanely difficult to make.
Very different challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a very different type of difficult.
Yeah, I think the more stripped down it is, the more the emphasis is on form. And if that's off, like on the Nakashima piece, there's no place to hide. If that base is wrong, too tall, too narrow,
Yes.
if that case proportion is off and is too clunky, it would just bang. You look at it at first glance, you go, ooh, you know.
Right,
And
yeah.
to look at something and just have it sort of sing it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. So the proportions and have to be just spot on.
Yeah.
You know, everything, every part of it. All right, who's
All
next?
right, I think you're next.
Am I next?
Yeah, go for it.
So I chose a piece.
Oh, dang, that's cool.
Yeah, by a guy that I worked with once named Seth Rolland,
Yeah.
who lives in Port Townsend, Washington, or he did when I worked with him. And actually, I was just doing photographs for a back cover and how they did it. And it was actually on this technique that we see here in the base where he makes alternating cuts from either end of a board, but he doesn't cut all the way through, and then he can sort of open it up like an accordion.
Yeah, they look kind of like wishbones.
Yeah. And this is just a hall table that he makes or has made. And I love how light the base feels, you know, how just light the table feels. And the curves of the parts are just so graceful and elegant. And it's something that looks very uncomplicated. It's very stripped down, elegant, simple, and yet is tremendously difficult to make. But it is just gorgeous. It's simply beautiful. And he does this technique on quite a few pieces. Because if I'm not mistaken, that base, all of the light colored wood in that base from the legs through the undercarriage structure, all of that is cut from a single piece of wood.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then he pulls it open. The only thing that's probably not is there's those stretchers at the stretchers at the bottom.
Sure.
On the ends are not part of that single piece, but you can see how it's just all a single big block of wood that's been cut in a precise way to create this amazing sort of trestle structure underneath. It's just phenomenal.
It's almost like he took a board and like stretched it, you know, like ripped it apart and stretched it so all the pieces kind of linked together, you know, as it tears.
Well, that's what he did do.
Oh, I thought he glued those pieces together.
No.
Oh, it's from one board that he took cuts from either end. Okay, I misunderstood.
He cuts in, but he doesn't cut all the way through the board. So there's, you know, like at the top of the legs, you see how it's solid, and you can see where the cut stopped. Okay. And so he just does that all the way across, and you see it's at the bottom too.
I thought he was taking those individual strips and you know, doing that trick and then gluing them up. Which is
that
even
steam?
crazier.
Does he steam it or anything to make it more flexible?
No.
Wow.
No, it just pulls open like that.
Cool.
Now, I don't know on this piece, I assume it was built the same way that he built there was a table on the back cover.
Right.
And I assume that it was exactly the same way. He could have used steam here, I don't know, but he did not use steam. When I saw him do it, and he started from I photographed him as he did it, this solid block of ash, and he just made these cuts, and he just went, brrr, and or crazy. That one opened up like a fan.
Yes.
It just went, it was like, that's pretty awesome.
Cool.
Did he use a bandsaw?
Yeah, he used a bandsaw. Yeah,
Awesome.
Just an amazing piece of furniture, technical wizardry.
Yeah, and imaginative.
Very imaginative. I know.
Who thinks of these things?
Right.
Seth
does, yeah. He's a great furniture maker. Beautiful furniture.
Yeah, there's a lot of them up in that part of the country, in the Port Townsend area.
Yeah, there is. The Northwest, what is that thing?
Is it a guild? I can't remember.
Yeah, like the Northwest Furniture Guild or something like that. They have a gallery in Seattle, which is pretty awesome. You go in there, there's all this amazing furniture by like Hank Holzer and I can't remember.
Judson Beaumont?
Nah, Judson's not in
Tim
there.
Zaleski, Daryl Peart's out there too, right?
Yeah. No, it's been so long I can't remember who else is there, but Hank is in there, and Hank's wife, whose name Judith Ames, and there's like 4 or 5 guys out there on like one island, and they all live there, and they make great furniture, and there's probably 10 or 15 people in that gallery.
Their boat was shipwrecked many years ago. After a 3-hour cruise.
They were all a bunch of furniture makers out on a booze cruise, and they got in a wreck, and now they're stuck on an island together. Wait till there's only one tree left. It'll become like the Hunger Games or something. Who gets the last tree?
Who gets the last board?
All right.
What you got, Tom?
Well, mine is inspired by what I saw at Fine Woodworking Live. The only class I really got to see from start to finish was Peter Follansby's presentation on 17th century furniture making and joinery. And one of the things that amazed me about his work was he pulled, I think it was the second example that I had. That one. He did one of the legs on the right or left. He basically rives all of his wood from green wood. And so he had this oak log with him that he just started hatcheting away at. And I was watching him do this stuff, and it was just the way he works and the way he's so comfortable with the tools and the axe and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought he was going to, chop himself or something. But he's so good at it, and his tools are so sharp that the wood just split apart perfectly. And then with just a little bit of work, he's got this 4-square board pretty much, and it's not, it's not perfectly 4-square. He doesn't go to that edge. And then he starts doing this crazy carving pattern, and it's just almost, I think all of it was just by eye. And he has these crazy methods, and watching him work his chisels and his gouges and everything to create these patterns with such ease. And then he hands it out. And one of the things that I always imagine, I've never touched like a piece like this. I've always seen them from a distance, and they look, you look at these photos and you think, oh man, that's really highly refined.
Right.
But he doesn't sand. He doesn't go into any of the carving areas and clean up any scratches or divots or anything like that. It's just straight off the chisel. Yeah. And that is what is amazing to me. And then he doesn't put any finish on it most of the time. But it was just such a fascinating slice of woodworking. And it's so much fun to watch someone who's so good do it. And it's one of those things where we mentioned, a graphic punch that Mike had mentioned. These pieces all have it, but it's so primitive the way they build them. And some of these 1,700 pieces are still around today, even though they're crudely constructed.
Right.
But he was such a master at all of his tools. And he joked about, someone said, hey, how do you must be really sharp. How do you sharpen? And he was like, I don't know much about sharpening. And I'm thinking, yeah, you do.
Yes.
I think, again, this is another example of, you look at this piece and it's all mortise and tenon joinery, right?
Yeah.
It's frame and panel construction. You think, oh, that's not hard. I can do that. To the way that he does it. Now, of course, it is tricky to master the tools that he has, but there's so much more involved in making this piece than just frame and panel construction. Yeah. It's like, just think about the logs that he has to get that allow that. Think how straight the grain on that log really needs to be,
right, to
be able to rive out boards that are close to 4 square when you're done,
right.
And there's so much knowledge involved in what he's doing. Yeah. That it's looks like, oh, I could do that, but no, you couldn't. Peter could.
Yeah, his presentation was so fun because when he talked about it, someone said, "Hey, what if it doesn't split the way you want?" And he says, "Well, now I've got a firewood, And he says, "My wood is free. I just go out into the woods and get another log."
Peter teaches quite a bit, and he's at Connecticut Valley, I think, on a fairly regular basis. So if you're in the New England area, I think he teaches this entire frame and panel blanket chest as a class. He also has like a carving class where you just do that panel and you learn that carving technique.
Yeah, and he's great. I mean, he had people mesmerized throughout his whole presentation. But I just love this piece. And what Matt said about the joinery, and I think that applies to all furniture. You get the joinery finished, and you're really only a quarter there. The shaping comes up, and surface decoration and whatever.
I wanted to watch his presentation, but sadly, both times he taught coincided with 2 times that I taught.
No, well, should have called that sick.
So I'll be right back, everybody.
I'll be back. Hey, Herr Follensby is doing something great down the hall.
Let's all go.
No, just another reason to go back to Fine Woodworking Live.
Yeah.
So let's move on to more questions. And this one, I don't know who this one is from. Do you know, Ben?
This is Skylar.
Where does it say Skylar?
Right down there.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong question. That's my bad. I was jumping ahead. Apologies. So how do you make sure you find everything you need at the lumberyard? Do you make a detailed parts list? If so, how detailed do you get? I find it difficult to do when solid wood panel glue-ups are involved. Do you have any tricks to make sure you're getting everything you need in one trip? And that's from Skylar, right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. I mean, it isn't like there's an easy answer because for me, that's a lot of work. On a more complex piece where I'm buying a lot of lumber, I will make a cut list. You know, I'll have the whole plan made up. I'll know the exact dimensions of all the major parts. And then I will create a cut list where I'm padding those dimensions by, you know, maybe an inch or two in length, maybe an inch in width, and literally take that to the lumberyard and, you know, start attacking a pile of lumber. And not only seeing what I can get out of what board in terms of how many boards I need, but also what are the really important parts? What are the show faces? You know, where can I hide a knot if I have to? What surface needs to be just dead on? Mm-hmm. If I need, for a top, you know, if I need multiple boards that have to match in color. And typically I like to go to lumberyard where they kind of leave me alone and I can sort of dig through the piles. And I'll even take a lumber crayon or chalk and actually mark up the part locations in the boards and then check off my cut list as I go. So when I get back to the shop with 7 or 8 or 10 boards, I'm not guessing, why did I get this? What am I supposed to get out of here? They're already marked up with the parts designations and everything, and it just makes it a lot easier to then attack the project and have a pretty good sense that I have enough lumber. That is always a big issue.
Yeah, and that's how I approach it when I am making like something large, you know, but I make a lot of stuff that is fairly small. And I've started to think about lumber in quite a different way than when I initially started to make furniture. So, you know, now when I go and I'll look for an 8/4 board, you know, and I'll look at the edge grain and see how tight the edge grain is, knowing that this 8/4 board is more than big enough to give me all the lumber I need to make the case and the dividers, for example, of a little case work box.
Right.
And what I'm more looking for is looking at the grain and looking and thinking about, okay, well, because I'm not going to use that board the way I bought it. You know, I'm going. One of the things I've started to do more and more often is what some people call rip and flip. So you slice that wide 8/4 board up into thin pieces where the edge becomes the face, and then I lay that down and glue it back together to create quarter sawn or rift sawn panels that are really wide. And so now that's how I, you know, so when I think about lumber, when I go to the lumber yard, I think about grain and I think about color and I think about whether or not this board will allow me to do what I want to with the lumber. But you know, that's because I do make smaller items and not large pieces of furniture. So right. I think if I were making large pieces of furniture, I would go about it the way you do. I think. If I were making a table, for example, which actually I'm going to make a table soon for my house, and I would go and I would look for boards that would be suitable for the top, and there I'd be selecting for appearance,
right?
And then try to find a rift sawn board for the legs. That probably need to be an 8/4 board, or So I think I would be looking at grain and knowing, in a sense, in my head already cutting that board up and saying that's going to be waste, that's going to be waste, and I need to. Here's that piece, and you end up. I'm sure I'd end up spending more money than someone who went and just said I can get all of these pieces onto this board.
Right. I
Yeah.
think when I very first started, not only did I take all those pieces, I sort of figured out, okay, I need 3 boards 8 inches wide by 8 feet long, 2 boards 6 inches wide, and then you get to the lumberyard. It's like none of those things exist.
Right,
And all of a sudden, the
right.
whole plan is blown up,
Yeah.
and you start to panic and start to buy a
You
whole
gotta
lot of wood. Yeah.
You want to have the big scrap pile. I made a mistake, and I'm still recovering from it. And I think it's what a lot of people do, is that when I was buying wood, I would, it's so expensive. So whenever it became available from yard sales, from woodworkers or wherever people are selling wood, I would just grab it. And so now I've got this big hunkin' pile of wood that I've been pretty lucky. I've been able to kind of design projects around what I have. But when I built this cabinet on stand, I had to go out and buy better walnut. I had these boards, and I'm thinking, I can make the legs by gluing it up. And I'm like, no, this is like my piece de resistance so far. I can't just glue up a piece. So then I went to the lumberyard with something really specific in mind, rift sawn, clean looking. So I think as I move on, as I'm building pieces, out of my head, as I'm designing, if I'm designing, I would probably do, what Mike does. And I think it's a safe thing to do in terms of sketching out what you need and kind of look, you have to have a good lumberyard, first of all.
Right.
I mean, we're lucky that we have places that allow you to kind of spend a half an hour to an hour looking through their piles.
In places that have good lumber.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. I mean, there was a place down in South Carolina that he'd let you look as long as you wanted to, but
You didn't find
it
it.
was all pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Well, one of the local places nearby that I've gone to and had really good luck there is they have a great scrap bin or cutoff bin, and you can get some really figured wood in those piles, and for drawer fronts or boxes or whatever. So you can find some real bargains in there. But I digress.
I mean, the thing about selecting lumber is that initially you think in terms of board feet, you think in terms of parts, and how can this part fit on this board? How many other parts can I get on there if I do that? I think the further you go along, the more you stop thinking like that, and the more you just start thinking about having high quality lumber available to you.
Right.
And and I've gotten to the point, I have an absurd amount of lumber, and I have not bought lumber in probably a year and a half to 2 years at least. And I've just been using what I have. And I think you just get to the point where you're more concerned about choosing grain and color that's right for the part and for the piece, as opposed to
Getting the right amount.
the right amount.
Yeah.
No, it makes
Yeah,
perfect
definitely.
sense. Because I think one of the things that you could go out and make, say, like Garrett Hack's hunt board, but if you don't choose the right wood, even if you've crafted it 100% well, it's still going to look wrong.
Yeah.
Because you picked the wrong wood.
And the other thing which was helpful for me as I learned this more and more, that you don't have to use the board the way you bought it. Just because the sawyer put that face on it or that edge on it doesn't mean that has to be the face or the edge for you.
Yeah.
You can, it's wood. You can cut it however you want to, and you can manipulate the grain to get what you need through some, just some basic knowledge of grain and understanding if I cut it this way, the grain's going to look like that on the face or the edge,
That was a real turning point for me, is the first time when I said, I don't have to use that original cut edge as the edge of the board.
Right.
If the grain is running off by a couple degrees, strike a line, saw it there. Yeah, there's a little bit of waste, but now you have
a straight grain
that's parallel to your work. It's like, wow, that's kind of cool.
That's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. So just back to the original question, it's like, just don't shortchange the front end of things. I know it's like time is tight in the shop for everybody, and you want to start a project, you want to get in there and start building. So it's like, I got kind of a plan. I think I know what I need. I'm going to go to the lumberyard and get it. And then you're in your shop and you don't have either the right wood or enough wood, and you're back at the lumberyard, or you start to make design changes while you're halfway through, building.
Right.
And it's, take your time, figure out what you're making, and make a really accurate cut list. Know what you need before you go to the lumber yard. However you have to do that, I think that's a real important thing.
Yeah. And it's also, I know it's hard because I was the same way when I started. Don't cheap out on the lumber. You know, don't be afraid to spend an extra $100 or $200 to get really good lumber if that's what you can do, you know, because in theory, you're making this piece of furniture to be in your house for 50 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So don't cheap out on the lumber. If what is really going to look good is a really nice cherry, don't satisfy yourself with ambrosia maple, you know? Get the really good cherry, even though it's going to cost you more, and do that. And
I like ambrosia maple.
oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
My favorite thing is to go to a lumber yard or a woodworking store somewhere and they try to sell ambrosia maple like it's curly maple. Like, oh, it's ambrosia maple. It's like,
Is that the one with the holes in it and
the weird staining?
in the kind of the staining, spalting kind of stuff?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I like it.
Mike, you're such
It's the
a...
one with the marshmallows and fruit.
Yeah, and that's not what you were saying at lunch today, Mike. Same goes for finishing and hardware.
Yeah, hardware's the toughest thing.
Don't cheap out on hardware.
No. I don't know how many times, like, okay, I'm to the project, here's my door, now I need a hinge. Well, go to Home Depot.
No.
Kind of looks like brass. Okay, we'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the greatest thing is that you can get really good, like hinges, butt hinges.
Yeah.
They're not that expensive.
expensive.
And I'm going to say from where?
Horton brasses.
Horton
yeah.
brasses.
Yeah.
They make phenomenal hinges and they are not expensive.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that that I've discovered, having made those mistakes at Home Depot with hardware, is that they're actually harder to install because they're so thin. You know, you can't really. It's harder to route an accurate hinge mortise
you're
with
right.
that material.
That's
so
true.
You get a nice, thick, heavy-duty hinge from somewhere, and you have a really good, solid piece to work with. I find it much easier to excavate the mortise and clean it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Horton brasses is great. So they have a limited size of their butt hinges. So if I need something atypical, I go to Whitechapel. They're really good stuff as well.
Yeah. But we like Horton. It's from Connecticut.
Yes.
They're in
And
Connecticut.
they hear a who.
How bad?
Hi,
What?
Ben.
You
Ben-
guys think I'm bad in the afternoons.
Ben liked that one.
No, he didn't.
Well,
Jeff didn't like it either.
Oh, come on, Jeff did. He's laughing. He's laughing on the inside. Here's the next question, and this one really doesn't have a name. I started working with hand tools recently. I've been honing a micro bevel on my plane blades and bench chisels with water stones, and that's working great. But I'm getting to the point where I need to regrind primary bevels to speed up sharpening. I tried regrinding with a granite stone and sandpaper, and it took forever and a lot of sandpaper.
And the question goes on,
Continued.
and there's
Oh.
the guy's name.
That's a horrible way to do a script. Do I need a wet grinder just to grind primary bevels? I still intend to hone on water stones, or would a less expensive bench grinder with the correct wheel work? I also have some turning chisels that need to be sharpened, so I would like whatever system I get to be able to do that in the future as well. And that's from Matt.
Simple
Really?
answer: yes. You need to buy the most expensive Tormek.
Well, I mean, once you mentioned turning tools, I mean, this is I get this question asked all the time. And I I teach sharpening. Oh, well, how do I do that? It's like, well, there are 3 answers and they all have their drawbacks. Sandpaper is great, very safe. It takes a long time. A water wheel grinder is really safe, really accurate, somewhat slow. I don't think it's that slow, but really expensive. And then you have a high-speed grinder, which is fast, not accurate. I tend to get scallops. You risk bluing the tool, but it's a lot cheaper than like a Tormek style.
Or a slow speed grinder.
Slow speed.
Not a high speed.
Right, but I mean,
Relatively
still
to a slow speed.
Faster
fast.
than
Yeah.
a wet grinder.
I mean, like grinder with the 2 wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then because you can get like is it the one way or the Wolverine tool
Yep,
rest,
I have that for my turning tools.
which is, I think if you're using a grinder, I think it's probably the best outfit there for doing turning tools. And then you have to get a different, make yourself or buy some sort of a tool rest to do your
Well, their
regular
basic,
stuff.
their normal tool rest for flat tools is fantastic too.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Cool.
Yeah. I use a slow speed grinder and I replace the wheel with one of the softer wheels.
Yeah, so I have a slow speed grinder. It was like $100. I got the 2 Norton white wheels.
Right.
And so one side is set up with the Wolverine jig for turning tools.
That had to be over $100 for that.
I don't remember. And the other side has the Wolverine thing for flat tools like chisel blades and plane blades. And that's what I use that. I use it all the time for my turning tools. And I do use it occasionally for when I get antsy and I want to sharpen something that needs to be ground, I'll take it over to the grinder and do it there. And that's what I use, is just a slow speed grinder. But I guess when we did the review of slow speed grinders, what we found was that
nothing was complete out of the box.
Right.
Yeah. They all needed better tool rests for the most part.
And
better
wheels
tool rest
sometimes.
And wheels. Yeah. And I bought and they're kind of tricky unless you're going to buy a Baldor, which is $900. You know,
Right.
It's a little fiddly trying to get the wheel to be balanced on there. And again, like I think it's Wolverine, which is one way. It's the name of the company that makes the Wolverine line. Yeah, I've got that. I've got that set
Also,
up.
they're
so
both for under
both.
$100.
Yeah, it's a really nice aftermarket setup for a grinder.
Cool.
Very good. And but you can also buy these little things to balance the wheels better.
Yeah.
But you can also, Chris Gochner, he did the grinder review, he kind of rotated, but I did it, and it was so tedious.
It was.
It worked,
tedious,
but it was like, oh my gosh, I'm
And
going to shoot myself.
You get a wheel dresser. Do you put a crown on your wheels?
My turning tool one, I do not.
Probably not,
because
right.
it's just going to get messed up anyway.
Right.
So, and I don't. I sort of put a little bit of a crown on the one for chisels and plane blades.
Yeah.
I follow was it Joe Moskowitz?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's raining outside.
It is raining outside. It's been raining all day.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Tom's been celebrating Cinco de Mayo all day.
I can tell when Ben is like had it and he's like ready to hang it up.
Ben, he doesn't have enough patience to be working with us.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of Shop Talk Live.
Wait a
Please
minute.
spread the word about what?
I thought we were going to do another segment, like best technique or something.
Oh, did I forget the technique?
Yeah. Have
Oh
we
my
run out of
gosh.
time?
Are we out of time?
No.
It's the internet. There's no such thing as running.
I got to start writing these scripts better.
Oh my
Because I skipped right over it.
If you come less prepared than me,
It's Friday.
that says something.
No more podcasting. No more casting of the pods on Friday. Well, let's go back. Rewind.
Yes.
It is time for our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week.
Everybody driving on the highway listening to this and think, "Oh, great, it's over." Now it's like, no, it's not.
We're gonna go. We're gonna take it to the next
They're
level.
like, yeah, it is over.
But
Sorry,
you can
guys.
just turn us off. Too,
Yes.
You
No,
know,
we're
if
gonna
it's
take it-
really that bad.
We're going to take it to 11 now.
Okay.
Okay, hit us with your technique then.
All right. So my technique, I couldn't decide. I was either going to do rip and flip, which I think I've done before on the podcast. But I think I'm actually going to go outside of the realm of true straight up woodworking techniques
Okay.
and give you guys a machinery moving technique. Okay. 2 versions of it. If you have a super heavy piece of machinery that needs to be moved, the first thing you can do is find like 4 or 5 chumps and invite them over to your house and have them move it for you, which is what I did recently when I moved my shop. The other thing when you're by yourself and you got to use your smarts is instead of someone's brawn.
You can buy that at Home Depot.
Yeah, you can't buy that.
They sell smarts in
A
the
can of
bargain
smarts.
aisle.
What did you just put up there? Ben did help me move my shop recently, very kindly. I needed to move my bandsaw, which is a 19-inch bandsaw, big and heavy, and I thought about putting it on a hand truck and leaning it back and rolling it, and I quickly decided that was a bad idea. And then I looked over and I spied some of my pipe clamps, 3/4-inch pipe clamps. And I was like, I've got pipes, and pipes are round, and pipes are like
Pipes
wheels. So I only had to tilt the thing back a little bit, and I got the base up on the first pipe, and it rolled super easy. And I just kept putting pipes underneath it, and it just rolled super easy across the floor.
How many pipes total did you need?
4.
So you always had like 3 in contact.
There was always 4 in contact.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, well, yeah, at least 3, because I did have to move it occasionally, and it worked phenomenally. It is predicated on the notion that you can at least lift up the machine a little bit. Like my jointer, which weighs 1,600 pounds, that's not going to really work. It would work, but you'd have to, jack it up a little bit and get those first pipes underneath it, and then it would roll easily. So it was it worked wonderfully,
Cool.
Yeah, that's my technique.
Awesome.
Rip and flip is a true woodworking thing, but I'll save that for another time.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, you already kind of covered it today.
I did, but I have pretty pictures on my Instagram, kenny.matt, which shows how I do rip and flip.
We're just rolling along. Hi, Ben.
My favorite technique of all time of the week is clamping a belt sander in your bench vise.
Nice.
I made the little splayed leg stand for a case piece I'm making right now, and once it was all glued
come
up,
on now. The technique is not clamping the thing in there. The technique is what you're using it for.
Yeah, I know, but it sounds better. So the splayed legs, I glued up this base, and of course, because the legs stick out at angles, the bottoms are not flush to the ground. And I didn't want to do the whole little scribey thing and saw it. The legs are kind of flimsy, not flimsy, but it's just really cumbersome. So I thought, what if I clamp a belt sander into my vise at the level of my workbench, and I can just put one leg on the belt and sort of sand it down and then sort of rotate the thing all the way around. And it worked out very well. When I got to the 4th leg, of course, then I put it on my table saw, and it was like a little rocky, but then I could just sort of hit, the opposing high legs just a little bit until it sat nice and flat. And I could dial it in without shortening the legs over more than I wanted to. Actually worked really well. It did leave sort of a fuzzy corner on the outfeed side of the sanding belt, but I just hit that with the chamfer that with the block plane, and it was fine. I had posted that on Instagram at Pekovich Woodworks, but and some people said that Peter Galbert, maybe Curtis Buchanan, they clamp a hand plane in their vise and do the same thing, but with a hand plane.
Oh,
so I thought, well, that's better. Yeah. So my favorite technique is clamping a hand plane in your vise. Yeah. So I'm going to give that a try the next time I do that, if I remember that, because it's probably going to be a while before I do this again.
Oh, don't worry, Mike. Ben and I will remind you of this on a regular basis, I'm sure.
All right.
Cool.
Tomas?
Hi.
Tom, did you also forget your technique?
Well, sort of. Well, my technique is I recently built a cabinet, and I had I made door and drawer pulls, and the post sticks through the drawer front, and I was thinking, well, how the heck am I going to clamp that, and get it nice and tight? So what I did is I had a spare block, and I drilled a hole through it and use it as a clamp call, so it goes over the post hole, so I can get a clamp right over the thing and get good clamping pressure across the pull and the clamping block. It was really kind of nice.
It's nice. I like that. Very smart.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Sometimes I do things that amaze me, but I know I read it in Fine Woodworking somewhere. I'm sure it was a methods of work tip somewhere that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a little post that's glued into the drawer front, and then you glue the pull onto the post? Is that what that was?
No, I actually put the post on the pull first.
Okay.
And then put it through the hole, and glued it in that way.
Got it.
So
cool.
I think just for now on, all your photographs need to have that whale in it somewhere.
You'd be surprised. I had at Fine Woodworking Lives, I had 4 or 5 guys walk up to me and talk about the bookshelf thing that I made for my first ever project, and a couple of guys mentioned the whale.
Someone asked me about the whales. Like, did Tom bring his whale?
Well, I'll bring it next time.
The only thing anyone ever mentions is they say, "Oh, is that the tool chest you had to pry open with a screwdriver?" It's like, yeah, it is. Thanks for
remembering.
Yeah.
Now I think we're done.
Are we?
I'm done.
All right. Well, he's throwing his hands up. He's
Ben doesn't know. Ben just woke up.
All right. Well, that really is it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. Shop Talk Live is dependent on your questions, so make sure to send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com. That's shoptalk@taunton.com. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, and while you're there, please give us the 5-star rating. And don't forget to leave your comments. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. Oh, I forgot to give my Instagram address.
Throw it out there, quick.
Throw it out there. What is it? It could be the outro. What's your Instagram?
I don't know.
Find Tom on Instagram.
Good luck.
TM McKenna 1945.
Then you gotta deal with all the Kumiko.
Kumiko.
You're not recording now, are you?
Then you gotta deal with all the Kumiko.
You just recorded all of that?
Kumiko.
Oh, fantastic.
Then you gotta deal with all the Kumiko.
None of that can be outro.
Kumiko.
It's all, it's far too.
Then you gotta deal with all the Kumiko.
Well, I'm not going to be the one to get in trouble.
Then you gotta deal with all the Kumiko.
Oh, dang, that's cool.
Kumiko.
That's pretty awesome.